The world of Hollywood is currently standing on a razor-thin edge. And if you've been paying attention to the 2026 document dumps, you know that the air is getting thick with questions that no one in the mainstream media wants to answer. Hey everyone, I'm Jenny, and today we are stepping directly into the eye of a storm that Hollywood has been desperately trying to suppress for years. I'm a deep dive investigator and cultural commentator, and I specialize in connecting the dots that the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. We aren't just looking at headlines today. We are peeling back the layers of a decades-long deception to uncover the truth behind the Queen of Nice and the shadows that have followed her from the bright lights of the stage to the darkest corners of the Epstein files. If you've been feeling like the official story just doesn't add up, you're in the right place, because we're about to go down the rabbit hole and find out exactly what happens when the mask finally slips. For decades, Ellen DeGeneres was the Queen of Nice, the woman who told us all to be kind to one another every single afternoon. But since her show went dark in 2022, that mask hasn't just slipped, it has completely shattered. We aren't just talking about a toxic workplace anymore. We are talking about a web of connections that lead straight back to the most infamous island in modern history. People are looking at the timing of her departure, the tragic fates of those closest to her, and the staggering details hidden in the latest Department of Justice files. And they are realizing that the "be kind" mantra might have been the greatest distraction ever staged. To really understand why the internet is exploding right now, you have to look at the sheer volume of data coming out of the Epstein investigation. Investigators have been meticulously cross-referencing office lines and voicemails, and what they've found is chilling. There is a specific voicemail that has resurfaced, a plea from a victim that mentions a high-profile on-set appointment. When you layer that over the investigative findings that suggest a certain Hollywood powerhouse was mentioned over 1,000 times in the broader Epstein index, the coincidences start to look like a roadmap. People are asking why a daytime talk show host would have any proximity to a man like Jeffrey Epstein, and more importantly, what role she played in the social engineering of the elite. This isn't just about being on a flight log. It's about a deep systemic integration into a world that thrives on secrecy. The narrative takes an even darker turn when we talk about the Leighton Hatch. We all remember that horrific crash in 2022. But what we don't talk about enough is the context. Anne was Ellen's most famous partner, a woman who had seen the inner workings of that world firsthand. Just as Ellen was shutting down her show and stepping back from the limelight, Anne was reportedly working on sharing her truth. The footage of Anne struggling and sitting up on that stretcher despite official reports saying she was immediately non-responsive has become a cornerstone of this investigation. Was she a liability? Was she a witness who knew too much about the pipelines being discussed in the Epstein emails? The public isn't buying the official story anymore, especially when you see how many people in that specific inner circle have met mysterious ends right when the legal pressure started to mount. And then there is the symbolism that was staring us in the face for years. If you look at the architecture of the sets, the specific striped motifs, and even the temple-like structures featured in the background of Ellen's show, the visual parallels to Epstein's Lil St. James are almost impossible to ignore. Critics argue that Hollywood loves to flaunt its allegiances, using stage design and high-end art to signal to those in the know. Whether it's the obsession with Basquiat's crowns or the strange, coded conversations about facials and extractions with stars like Sandra Bullock, the audience is starting to read between the lines. They are looking at the code words found in the millions of Dodge pages, words like pizza and beef jerky used in contexts that have nothing to do with food, and they are asking if these celebrities were normalizing a culture of exploitation right in front of our eyes. The atmosphere grew even more somber with the loss of Stephen Twitch Boss. He was the energy of the show, the man everyone thought was the happiest guy in the room. But when he left that motel note mentioning past challenges and burdens, the community began to wonder if the weight of what he saw behind the scenes became too much to bear. Twitch was a producer. He was in the room for the private conversations. When a show of that magnitude shuts down and the key players start disappearing or fleeing the country, it suggests that the toxic workplace allegations were just a smokescreen to keep the public from digging into the real horror. We are looking at a pattern of silence, a pattern of cleansing, and a pattern of elite figures moving their pieces off the board before the 2026 client list finally goes fully public. We are seeing the links, the tragic losses, and the strange visual evidence that points to a much larger, much darker operation. But what happens when the Queen of Nice decides to leave the United States permanently? Why is the UK suddenly the safest place for a woman who spent 30 years building an American empire? As we move into deep dive, we're going to look at the move to England, the connection to the burgeoning Diddy files, and the terrifying allegations regarding the freezer and the occult ceremonies that are currently circulating in the deepest corners of the internet. This isn't just a Hollywood scandal, it's a reckoning. When we look at the timeline of the last few years, the pattern isn't just suspicious, it's a neon sign pointing toward a massive shift in the Hollywood power structure. We aren't just talking about a talk show ending. We are talking about a total evacuation. By 2024, after decades of being the centerpiece of American daytime television, Ellen DeGeneres didn't just retire, she vanished from the continent. She and Portia de Rossi offloaded their iconic Montecito estate and fled to a rural farmhouse in the Cotswolds, England. The official line was that she was escaping a political landslide, but for those of us tracking the 2026 Epstein file dumps, the timing is a masterclass in tactical relocation. You don't move your entire life, your horses, and your history across the Atlantic just because you're unhappy with an election. You move when the Department of Justice starts unsealing millions of pages of emails that mention names in the triple digits. The UK doesn't just offer rolling hills, it offers a different legal jurisdiction. A buffer zone between her and the subpoenas that are currently flying through the California courts, and the shadows she's trying to outrun aren't just coming from the past. They are colliding with the present. As we move deeper into 2026, the Diddy files have become the missing piece of the puzzle. For years, Ellen's show was a mandatory stop for the industry's biggest players, including Sean Diddy Combs. But now, as Diddy's legal empire crumbles under RICO investigations and secret party allegations, people are looking back at their on-air chemistry with fresh eyes. They're seeing the inside jokes about real parties and the high-level social access she provided as more than just entertainment. Critics are suggesting that she wasn't just a host, she was a gatekeeper. In the world of high-level fixers, you need someone to normalize the monsters. And there was no one better at making the elite look relatable than Ellen. The internet is now flooded with theories that her sudden exodus was a preemptive strike, a way to put distance between herself and the fallout of the Diddy investigation, which many believe is just an extension of the same network Epstein operated in for decades. This brings us back to the most harrowing part of this entire saga, the voices that were silenced right before the floodgates opened. We have to talk about the 2026 reveal regarding the side notes found in the Epstein files, notes that allegedly mention image cleanup deals with 25 major celebrities. Investigators are looking at the specific date Ellen announced the end of her show, which was just as the legal pressure on Ghislaine Maxwell reached its boiling point. Was the toxic workplace scandal a controlled demolition? Was it easier to destroy her reputation for being mean than to let the public find out she was allegedly part of a much deeper, more systemic recruitment pipeline? The deaths of Anne Hetch and Stephen Twitch Boss remain the two most massive red flags in this entire narrative. Twitch, her co-executive producer, was found in a motel room just miles from his home, having left a note about burdens. Anne Hetch, the woman who knew Ellen's secrets better than anyone, died in a crash that has become a lightning rod for conspiracy theorists. When the two people who held the keys to your private life are gone within months of each other, and you're the only one left to pack a suitcase and move to rural England, the Queen of Nice starts to look more like the Queen of Survival. But the most disturbing part of the 2026 updates is the emergence of the medical allegations. We've seen the viral clips of her laughing with Sandra Bullock about extractions from the young, but the Dodge files have added a layer of terrifying context. These documents describe Epstein's obsession with genetic medicine and personalized longevity. They talk about stem cell research, facilities, and underground medical chairs at Zorro Ranch. While the mainstream media calls any link between these files and Hollywood stars a bizarre conspiracy, the public is looking at the invoices, They are looking at the $2,000 genomic sequencing charges and the mentions of longevity studies that used gene editing. The theory that these elites were using the fountain of youth rituals, the same ones mentioned in the diaries of survivors, is no longer just a fringe rumor. It's a question of where the money went and who was benefiting from the research being done on those islands. As we stand here in 2026, the final warning is clear. The era of the untouchable celebrity is over. Whether it's the crowns and skeletons in the artwork, the striped temples on the sets, or the permanent move to a Cotswolds farmhouse, the patterns are impossible to ignore once you see them. We are watching a global reckoning where the Diddy files, the Epstein logs, and the Hollywood pipelines are all converging into one single dark truth. Ellen DeGeneres may have moved across the world, but the documents stay right here. They are being read, they are being shared, and they are being used to build a case that no amount of kindness can stop. The rabbit hole doesn't end in England. It ends with accountability. The question isn't if the truth will come out, it's who will be left standing when the final file is unsealed.